She didn't drown. The sea refused to kill her. Iron snapped shut. Chains began to sing. Prayers fell silent, and in the exact moment when death was meant to become holy, something went wrong. The silence shattered. The water pulled back, and the sin remained alive. This is a story about a punishment that never existed in the records, about faith turned into a weapon, and about a truth they tried to drown, but it came back. If you're hearing this, someone desperately wanted you to stay silent. If these words reach you, then the pause has crossed hands. I am no longer counting. The count has taken me. What remains is weight without a bearer, sound without a throat. That is how truth survives when bodies fail. They buried me where records thin. A name was said wrong on purpose. The prayer was short. The stone was plain. No water nearby. They learned at last. But the sea does not measure distance the way men do. It reaches through ground, through memory, through the habits of fear passed from mouth to mouth. It reaches you now. You may wonder why nothing followed. No uprising, no reckoning, no sign in the sky. This is not that kind of story. Justice that arrives loudly is often late. Justice that whispers is patient. What happened after me is not written because it is not finished. The iron will surface again. Not the same piece, not the same shore. Iron learns roots. It travels by hands and needs and names that change. It will be called something else. It always is. The sea penance was not unique. That is the truth men fear more than guilt. It was a pattern, a method, a way to let power pretend its hands were clean while the water did the work. Remember this. Whenever death is hidden, someone is being taught a lesson. Whenever a right avoids witnesses, someone is being warned. Whenever faith demands silence, it is afraid of sound. I did not save her. I did not save myself. I saved a fracture, a moment where the machine stuttered. That is enough to unmake it, slowly. If you feel unease near calm water, trust it. If you hear counting where no voice speaks, listen. If you sense a pause when none is permitted, stay there. Do not ask for her name. Names close stories. Let this one stay open. Ask instead why certain punishments are never painted, why some stones are always damp, why bells hesitate after storms, as if waiting for permission to ring. History is not what is remembered. It is what refuses to stay buried. I leave you with no comfort. Comfort is a door that locks from the outside. I leave you with a task. Watch the margins. Read what is not said. Listen for chains beneath hymns. Listen for water where there should be dust. And when you are told that the sea cleanses all sins, remember this confession. The sea refused. If this story unsettled you, imagine what was never found. We went by the back passage, where the stones sweat even in winter. The key fit a door I had never seen, though I had copied every inventory of the abbey's locks. The iron turned with a sigh, as if relieved to be used again. Beyond was a stair, narrow as a throat. We descended in single file, the constable first, then two monks, then me. Prior Anselm came last, his rosary clicking like small bones. At the foot lay a room without altar, yet it felt like a chapel, not holy, only set apart. The walls were washed with lime, so bright they seemed to glow. In the center stood an iron frame, taller than a man, bolted to a slab of stone. Its shape was wrong, as if a cage had learned to kneel. Chains hung from it, 3 lengths, 1 for the neck, 2 for the wrists. Below, 2 smaller rings waited for ankles. The metal was pitted and black, and when the lamplight touched it, it drank the flame. A trough had been cut along the floor, leading to a grating in the corner. The grate smelled of brine. I saw salt crusted there, though no sea lay under the abbey. Water had come this way, often. Right, the constable said. I wet my quill, though there was no inkpot on the table. A monk brought one from a chest, already open, as if prepared long ago. The ink was thick and dark, yet it shone with a strange green sheen. I did not ask what made it so. By decree of crown and sacrament, the constable intoned. The sea penance is appointed for those whose sin stains the land. The sea alone may scour what earth cannot bear. Sacrament? I murmured before wisdom could stop my tongue. Prior Anselm's gaze struck me like a lash. The sea is God's mouth, he said. It swallows impurity. It returns only clean bones. I wrote his words, and my hand shook. The monks moved about the frame with the care of men laying out vestments. They checked bolts. They tested links. They rubbed the rings with tallow, so the iron would not scream too loudly when it tightened. All this was done with devotion, like preparing a chalice. Who is to be cleansed? I asked, and hated myself for asking. The constable did not answer. He only pointed to a second door, smaller, barred. From behind it came a sound, not a cry, not a plea. A slow breath, measured, as if someone counted heartbeats to stay awake. My stomach turned. The sea was not here, yet it was everywhere in that room. In the damp, in the salt, in the quiet that pressed upon my ears. "Remember," the prior said softly, "to doubt is to share the sin." Then the barred door opened, and a woman stepped into the light. Her hands were bound, but her eyes were unbound, and they judged us. They named the right with care, as men name storms they wish to master. The sea penance was not born of rage. That is the lie. It was born of order, of calm hands and measured breath, of the belief that pain, arranged rightly, becomes prayer. I learned this as I wrote. The iron frame had a name older than the abbey. The monks called it the cradle, not because it gave life, but because it held the body bent, as an infant bends, helpless and open. The spine was forced forward. The neck ring drew the chin down. The wrists were chained high, so the shoulders burned and the chest could not rise full. The ankles were last, always last. The monk told me so and smiled as if sharing a trade secret. Silence was required. No prayers spoken aloud, no cries answered. Sound, they believed, stirred the sea's mercy away. A quiet death pleased God more than a loud one. The woman was placed within the frame, and the iron accepted her as if remembering her shape. The chains were tightened not all at once, but in turns, so the body learned obedience. Each click of metal marked with a nod, each nod recorded in my bones. Water came later. The constable explained it as doctrine. The sea cleanses because it does not choose. It takes king and beggar alike. It carries sin outward, disperses it, dissolves it. A death given to the sea is not murder, it is release. I wrote that too. What I did not write was the way the monks avoided her eyes, or how the iron creaked like a living thing when her weight settled, or how the lamp guttered, though no wind moved. They told me this horror was ancient law, that repetition had made it sacred, that what is done often enough becomes right. Holiness, Prior Anselm said, is habit. They spoke of processions at dawn, of carrying the cradle to the shore under black cloth, of hymns hummed inward, never sung, of lowering iron and flesh together into the surf, where waves finish what men begin. The woman listened. She did not weep. When asked to confess, she lifted her head as far as the ring allowed. "I have nothing," she said calmly, "only a spine that would not bow." The constable struck her, not in anger, but in correction. Blood ran from her lip, bright as a seal. "Right," he told me. I wrote of treason, of refusal, of disorder disguised as conscience. The words tasted like rust, yet even as ink dried, I knew the truth moving beneath it, like a tide under ice. This was not penance. This was example, and examples must be seen. The monks began to prepare the doors to the shore. Outside, the sea answered, though no one had spoken to it. She was accused before sunrise, though the charge was older than dawn. They read it in the outer hall, where banners drooped like tired tongues. "Treason," they said. "Treason against crown and consecrated order." Her name was spoken once, then never again, as if names could flee. I knew her, not well, enough to know the lie. She sold linen by the quay and read letters for those who could not. She refused a levy she could not pay. She refused a vow she did not make. When pressed, she stood straight. That was the crime. They offered her mercy shaped like obedience. "Kneel," they said. "Sign," they said. "Bend, and the sea will pass you by." She looked at the ink, then at the iron, then at the men who hid behind both. "I will not lend my breath to your silence," she said. The hall shuddered. A monk crossed himself too late. They bound her wrists with rope that smelled of fish and old prayers. She did not resist. Calm clung to her like a second garment. It frightened them more than shouting would have. I was ordered closer. To write her confession as spoken. She gave none. She spoke instead of bread prices, of tides, of the king's new tax. She spoke as if the world were still shared. "Write," the constable hissed. I wrote nothing. That omission marked me, though I did not know it yet. They pronounced sentence without vote. The words fell heavy and practiced. "See penance, at next ebb, by authority of crown and altar." The hall exhaled, relieved to be done. When they led her away, she met my eyes, not to beg, to place a weight there, to say, "Remember." I followed at a distance. Doors closed behind us like jaws. Whispers ran ahead. Orders changed hands. Keys appeared, vanished. A room was sealed that had never been opened. Another was opened that should have remained stone. In the stairwell, Prior Anselm stopped me. "You will keep your place," he said. "Ink has edges. What if the edge cuts truth?" I asked. His face hardened. "Truth is not yours." Below, the woman was made ready. Above, bells rang for terse, cheerful, and wrong. The sea waited, patient as a ledger. I understood then how lies endure, not by noise, by calm, by men who fear disorder more than death, and by clerks who keep writing. I felt the walls lean closer, listening. Every step carried judgment. Every pause invited a hand upon my shoulder. I tasted brine where no water fell. I counted breaths, fearing one would be taken as consent. Somewhere a seal cooled in wax. Somewhere a door was braced. Somewhere a hymn ended too soon. The machine of mercy turned, smooth, unquestioned, fed by fear, and I walked within its teeth. Nothing cracked, nothing screamed. That was the terror. Order held, smiling until it asked me to smile too, and keep silent for the sake of peace alone. The truth did not arrive like lightning. It seeped. It came in murmurs that stopped when I entered, in glances exchanged too quickly, in orders spoken twice, then countered in whispers. The abbey shifted its weight, as if hiding a bruise. I was sent to copy a ledger that did not exist, then to fetch keys already hanging at a belt, then told to wait, and waiting became a command. Silence thickened. It pressed on the ears until the pulse grew loud. A monk I trusted would not meet my gaze. Another pressed a finger to his lips without thinking. I heard the word shore spoken where no shore should be. I smelled pitch and salt carried inward against all sense. At the door to the sealed room, the constable stood with 2 guards. Their faces were pale, as if dawn had fled them. He saw me and frowned, then waved me through as one waves through smoke. Inside, the woman sat on a bench, wrists bound anew. The iron waited behind her, draped in cloth. She looked smaller there, not from fear, but from the weight of watching men pretend. "They have changed the hour," a monk muttered. "The tide will be wrong." The constable snapped. "The sea obeys God, not clocks." Yet his hand shook on the hilt. I knew then. Not all knew. Enough did. The lie had grown teeth. It was biting its makers. I stepped closer. "This is not law," I said, quietly. "It is convenience." The room froze. A guard shifted his feet. A monk crossed himself. Again, too late. "Careful," the constable said. "Your ink is thin." The woman spoke, and the sound cut clean. "They fear the pause," she said. "The moment when the water does not answer." No one told her to be silent. Orders came suddenly. The cloth was pulled away. Chains were checked twice, then once more. A messenger arrived, breathless, bearing a sealed strip. The seal was broken without prayer. "Proceed," the constable said too quickly. The woman was lifted. The iron received her again. The cradle closed around her like a remembered sin. Metal kissed metal. The sound rang too long. I looked for Prior Anselm. He was not there. "Where is the prior?" I asked. "He is at prayer," said a monk. "For us." For himself, I thought, and wrote nothing. We moved through passages not used in daylight. The abbey's bones creaked. Doors opened that had forgotten hinges. Outside, the wind had turned. The sea's voice was wrong. Too low, too slow. At the shore, the tide lay farther out than expected. Stones glistened like teeth. The iron was set at the edge. Chains were braced. The woman breathed steadily. Then something failed. Not loudly, not at once. A pause. A hitch. The sea did not rise. Air pressed like wool upon the mouth. No gull cried. No hymn held. We stood where men pretend the world obeys. They lowered the cradle by ropes dark with pitch. The iron kissed the surf, then waited. Waves lapped and drew back, shy as thieves. The chains tightened with a sound like teeth set against cold. "Lower," said the constable. Nothing answered. The woman's breath counted time. 1, 2, 3. She did not look at the sea. She looked at us. A rope groaned. A knot slipped. Not far. Enough. The cradle tilted. Water rushed where it should have climbed. The ring at her neck dipped. Salt burned her skin. She gasped once. Silence returned heavier. "Steady," a monk said, voice broken. The tide hesitated, then fled. Stones showed. Kelp lay exposed, writhing. The iron hung half fed, half denied. I heard a sound no rite prepares for. Laughter, not hers, the sea's. Low, long, like a breath held since creation. "Again!" the constable barked. "Pull!" Hands strained. Ropes burned palms. The cradle lurched. One ankle ring snapped open with a shriek. The chain whipped free, striking iron, striking bone. She cried out then, once. The sound split the morning. All eyes turned away. Mine did not. I saw blood mingle with foam. I saw the frame yaw, refusing. "Stop," someone whispered. "Finish," another prayed. The sea surged, sudden, wrong, too soon. Water climbed the iron's ribs and broke against the chest. The woman arched, bound, alive. The neck ring held. The breath did not. Then the pause. The terrible pause. The water fell back. She hung there, coughing, choking, alive. The rite had failed. God had not swallowed. The law stood naked. A gull screamed at last. The constable raised his hand to strike the signal again. It trembled. He looked to the monks. They looked to the shore. No one looked at heaven. The woman found her voice through salt and pain. "You see," she said, "even the sea refuses you." Men shouted prayers without sound. Orders tangled. Ropes crossed wrong. A guard slipped and fell to his knees, weeping into shingle. The prior's absence became a weight heavier than iron. I tasted bile and salt and ink. My quill lay useless, snapping in my fist. I thought of ledgers and margins and how truth bleeds when boxed. The wind shifted east and brought rot from the flats. Bells rang somewhere behind us, late and lost. A monk vomited and hid his face. The constable's eyes searched for a sign he could command. The sea gave none. Foam traced letters I could not read, then erased them. The cradle groaned like a living back. The woman's breathing rasped, counting still. 1, 2, 3. The pause lengthened. Fear became doctrine. Men watched their hands as if guilty already, waiting for mercy to arrive late, or for authority to blink, or for the sea to speak plainly, and end the lie forever this morning. That was when the bolt sheared. The bolt did not fly. It sighed, a tired sound, metal giving up. The cradle shuddered. One shoulder dipped. The frame twisted against the ropes like a beast refusing slaughter. Chains clanged wild. The neck ring held, but the angle broke the order of the right. Cut her free, someone said. It might have been me. It might have been the sea. No, the constable said, too fast. Bind, restore, he signaled fire. Torches came as if waiting. Pitch flared. Smoke clawed the air. Not to warm, to blind, to hurry fear into obedience. Seal it, a monk cried. Seal it now. They hauled the cradle back, scraping stone, leaving blood like a map no one would follow. The woman hung slack, breathing shallow, eyes open, alive enough to remember. Too alive. They did not finish her at the shore. That is the truth they burned. They dragged iron and body into the lower vault where waves once fed the grates. The tide returned late, angry, slapping stone. Doors slammed, bars dropped, orders snapped like whips. I was pushed against a wall, a torch thrust close. You saw nothing, the constable said. You wrote nothing. The monks began the fire ritual. Incense mixed with pitch. Psalms rushed and stumbled. Words collided. Scents fled. Smoke swallowed corners. Shadows grew teeth. They pried the neck ring open with a lever meant for coffins. The sound cracked the vault. She fell forward, boneless, gasping. Someone covered her mouth. Someone turned away. Someone crossed himself until his fingers bled. I do not know who gave the final command. I know only the water rose behind the grates, fast now, eager. They slid the iron lid into place. Not on the cradle, on the vault itself. They sealed her with the sea. The iron door boomed shut. Chains were fed through rings and locked. Keys changed hands twice. Wax dripped. A seal pressed. The sound echoed like a bell underwater. Then the work of forgetting began. Records were fetched and scraped. Names vanished. Dates bled away. The parchment I held was torn, then burned. Ash was mixed with salt and scattered into the surf. A monk kissed the ground where it fell. Justice, Prior Anselm said, appearing at last, his face pale as chalk. Mercy, he added, softer, to no one. We were made to kneel. Oaths were spoken into smoke. Silence was sworn. I felt the oath enter me like a hook. That night doors were braced. Fires were kept high. No one slept near the shore. Bells rang wrong hours to confuse memory. By dawn, the abbey stood clean again, except for me. I carried the sound of her breath. I carried the pause. I carried the knowledge that justice had blinked, and power had covered its eyes. And I lived, which was the worst sin of all. Years gnawed the abbey into softer lines. Kings died. Priors changed. Stones were repointed where salt had kissed them too often. Memory thinned, as it is trained to do. I grew older and quieter. My hand learned to copy without thought. I learned which ledgers to keep fat and which to starve. Silence became a second skin. At night, the sea still counted for me. Decades passed. Then came the workmen. Storms had bitten the shore hard that winter. A section of the old seawall failed, and the abbey ordered repairs. New men came with hammers and bright curses. They laughed too loudly. They knew nothing. That is how discovery arrives. I watched from the path above as they cut back weed and stone. The tide was low, too low. The sea likes to show its teeth when reminded. A hammer rang hollow. Not stone, not wood, iron. They cleared it slowly, puzzled. A curved edge, rusted black. Barnacles clung where no barnacles should cling. Coral threaded the seams like prayer beads. It's a chest, one man said. No, another answered. Too thick. They levered it free as water crept back, nosing. The object rolled and settled. A lid showed, warped inward. Chain still kissed its corners, fused by salt. I felt my knees weaken. The air tasted old. They cut the lid with effort, sparks snapping into damp. When it opened, water spilled out. Not fresh, not clean. Dark, heavy, stinking of years. Seawater that had never been the sea. Inside lay iron again, bent, familiar. The cradle's curve unmistakable, though eaten and soft. Coral bloomed along the neck ring. A chain lay snapped, its break old and bright beneath rot. There was no body, only silt, only bone dust pressed into corners, only a scrap of cloth, darkened beyond color, trapped in a bolt hole like a thought that would not leave. The men stepped back. Jokes died. "What is it?" one asked. No one answered. A foreman crossed himself and ordered it covered. The tide rushed back too fast, licking the find, reclaiming. Word was sent upward. Orders came down. Different orders than before, but kin to them. The iron was hauled inland at dusk. No record was made. A priest blessed the ground without looking at it. The men were paid and sent away early. I walked to the shore alone after dark. The sea was calm, almost kind. I knelt where the iron had lain and pressed my palm to the stones. They were warm, as if remembering. The past does not stay buried. It waits. I knew then why I had lived, not for mercy, for witness. The sea had kept the account when men would not. I was summoned before the chapter at dawn. No charge was read. None was needed. Faces looked past me, as if I were already smoke. They asked what I had seen at the shore. I answered with weather, with tools, with men doing work. Truth in pieces is still a lie, they taught me. They nodded, pleased. A parchment lay waiting, blank. I was told to sign that nothing of note had been found. I dipped my quill. The ink bloomed green as before. My hand remembered the weight. "Speak," Prior Anselm said. "Older now, smaller, and be done." I signed. That night the iron was moved again, deeper, farther from water. The sea protested with a sudden wind, then fell quiet, as if satisfied the lesson was learned. Years thinned into ash. I left the abbey for a cell inland. Fewer waves reached me there, but the counting continued. 1, 2, 3, always the pause. I dreamed of the cradle empty and rocking. I dreamed of chains learning my name. I dreamed of a woman standing unbent, asking nothing. When age bent my spine at last, I returned to the shore. Stones had shifted. The walls stood new. Children played where men once knelt. The sea wore a harmless face. I knelt and whispered an apology I had carried too long. The tide listened. It did not forgive. I write now because ink decays slower than breath, because seals fail, because fire forgets to finish its work, because silence grows hungry. If this page is found, know that justice can drown without water. Know that faith can be taught to look away. Know that the sea remembers even when men erase. Do not ask her name. Names are nets, and she escaped them. Ask instead why the shore is narrow where walls are thick. Ask why iron blooms with coral. Ask why bells ring wrong hours after storms. The sea penance was not a rite. It was a test. It failed. And so did we. If this story unsettled you, imagine what was never found. Remember this, reader of ashes. I do not seek pardon. I seek weight. Carry it. Let it slow your steps near water. Let it sharpen your hearing when authority speaks softly. When a right is hidden, ask whom it hides from. When records thin, ask who grows fat. When silence is praised, listen for chains. The sea keeps ledgers no crown can audit. It balances slowly, patiently, without mercy, without haste. One day iron returns. One day walls crack. One day pauses speak. Until then, walk wary. Pray less loudly. And if you must write, write as if salt were watching, because it is. It waits beyond memory, beneath vows, beneath stones, beneath sleep, and it will ask nothing when it collects, only that the count be finished at last. I have written. You have heard. The rest belongs to the water alone. Remember this warning when tides grow quiet and doors close forever. I thought the telling would empty me. It did not. Truth is not a vessel that drains. It is a weight that shifts. After the finding, after the signatures, after the moving of iron into deeper dark, the abbey learned new habits. Doors were checked twice. Night watches doubled. The shore path was narrowed with stone, so feet would pass single file, counted. The sea was spoken to kindly, as one speaks to a dog that has bitten. Pilgrims still came. They prayed louder near the water. They were told the sound pleased God. I watched them and learned how noise hides listening. Once, a novice asked why the bells rang at odd hours after storms. Prior Anselm said the sea confuses time, and God must be reminded. The novice nodded, relieved to have a shape for fear. I carried the shape without relief. Years later, another storm stripped weed from the rocks and laid bare an old ring set into stone. A mooring, they said, a remnant. It was cut free within the day. The cut marks were fresh. The stone bled rust. I said nothing. Silence is easier when practiced, but silence has a cost. It demands payment in dreams, in pauses, in the way breath falters when water is near. It demands that you look away when the innocent are weighed for convenience. It demands that you forget faces, faces, and remember, only forms. I failed at forgetting. Sometimes, at low tide, the sea goes glassy and holds the sky without breaking it. In those moments I hear a count begin, though no mouth moves. 1, 2, 3. The pause stretches, asking a question no law can answer. Men like to believe rights bind the world. They do not. They bind men to their own shadows. I have watched iron rot into lace and still keep its shape. I have watched stone crack along lines set long before hands learned chisels. I have watched names erased return as echoes, changing nothing and everything. If you wonder why records are thin, look to the shore. If you wonder why prayers are rushed, listen for water. If you wonder why justice is heavy, lift the lid that was cut and not explained. There are places where the sea refuses offerings. It pushes them back. It leaves them where feet must pass. It teaches without words. I leave this part unfinished on purpose, not because I lack courage, but because endings invite comfort. Comfort is the last gift power gives. Carry the weight forward. Let it trouble your sleep. Let it sharpen your ear when a voice speaks softly of mercy and points away from the water. Remember the pause. Remember the refusal. Remember that the sea did not cleanse the sin that day. It exposed it. The count continues. Listen, I learned to fear calm more than storm. Storms declare themselves. They shout their intent. Calm arrives masked, with smooth hands and promises of order. Calm is when men decide what must be hidden. After the finding, visitors were guided away from the shore. A low wall became higher. A hedge was planted where stones once drank spray. The path bent inland. Small changes, holy reasons. I was tasked with copying a new rule for the novices. It spoke of humility, of obedience, of not lingering where water speaks. I wrote the words until they dulled, then wrote them again. Ink makes lies durable. At meals, talk shifted. The sea penance was never named, yet it shaped every sentence. Men praised mercy with tight mouths. They spoke of sins that stain land. They avoided the word wrong. Wrong suggests repair. Sin suggests removal. One night a fisherman came to the gate, half mad with drink and fear. He swore his net had caught iron where fish should be. He swore it rang like a bell underwater. He was laughed away with bread and a blessing. His net was burned for rot. No one asked where he cast it. I dreamed of the cradle turning on its own, rocking with the tide, learning patience. Age taught me how guilt settles. It does not scream. It weighs. It bends the back. It slows the step at thresholds. It makes you count breaths in places where counting invites notice. I tried prayer. Words broke apart. I tried confession. The seal tasted of wax and ash. I tried work. Work took, but never paid. Once, during repairs in the lower vaults, a mason struck a stone that sounded wrong. He frowned. The foreman ordered a patch. Lime went on thick. The sound was buried. Sound is easier to bury than iron. I stood there with my ledger and felt the old pause. 1, 2, 3. I waited for refusal. None came. Men cheered the fix. That was worse. Because refusal teaches, compliance erases. I began to write at night, small lines on scraps meant for kindling. I hid them in walls, under sills, in cracks that breathe. Not names, never names, only shapes, counts, descriptions of iron and water and silence. Enough for a mind to follow without being led. Why risk this? Because survival buys nothing if it purchases forgetting. Because faith that feeds on erasure will starve the world. Because the sea keeps its own grammar, and someone must learn to read it. If you have found these words, you are already counted, not by me, by what waits. Do not seek proof. Proof is a net that tears. Seek pattern. Pattern endures. Watch where walls thicken near water. Listen for bells that ring when no hour asks. Notice the men who bless ground they will not touch. Remember the woman who would not bow. Remember the pause that unmade a right. Remember that calm can be the loudest lie. I will continue while breath allows. Not to finish, but to keep the count honest. The sea is listening. When winter came hard, the sea grew quiet in a way that frightened even the old. Ice traced the shallows. Waves lost their teeth. Men praised the calm and called it blessing. I counted breaths and waited for the pause to speak. It spoke in absence. Fish vanished from nets set near the wall. Boats returned light. Oars struck iron once, twice, then learned to turn away. No one wrote this down. Hunger was blamed on weather. Weather is obedient. It does not argue. A young monk fell ill. Fever took him quickly. In his ravings, he spoke of chains and cold mouths, and a woman standing where water should be. They bound his hands to keep him from tearing his tongue. They prayed louder. He died before dawn. His cell was scrubbed. His words were called Mercy's Trial. I wrote none of this where eyes could find it. The abbey sent alms to the coast villages that year. Generous alms. They called it care. I saw it for what it was. Payment. Salted silence. At the shore, the sea crept back inch by inch, reclaiming calm. It laid weed where stone had been cut. It hid scars with patience. Men learned that skill from it. One evening, at low tide, I found a small thing among the rocks. A ring, not iron. Bone, polished smooth, a child's trinket perhaps, or a marker. It fit my finger too well. I dropped it and watched the water take it without ripple. The pause followed me inland that night. I began to mark days by sound instead of light, by the way doors closed, by how quickly keys were turned, by which prayers were rushed. These are truer calendars. Power hates the pause. It fills it with words, with fire, with work. But the pause returns. It always does. It is the space where refusal lives. I was summoned again, years later, to witness another judgment. Not the sea penance. A lesser thing. A hanging. Public. Loud. The crowd cheered. Justice likes noise when it wants to be believed. As the rope was fitted, I watched the sea in my mind. I watched it refuse. I watched it wait. The condemned man screamed. The crowd roared. Order was restored. Men went home lighter. No pause followed. That is how you know the difference. I am not brave. I stayed. I copied. I ate. I aged. I tell you this so you do not mistake witness for virtue. Virtue bends. Witness remains. If you ask why the sea did not take her, I cannot answer. Perhaps it does not cleanse. Perhaps it remembers. Perhaps it does not accept what is offered in bad faith. I only know this. When the sea refuses, men panic. When men panic, they erase. Look for erasure. It is the truest map. I will write again while hands obey. The count is not finished. Old age makes the body honest. It creaks. It slows. It remembers injuries the mind pretends to forget. My hands ache when rain comes off the sea. My breath shortens near stone walls. The pause has settled into my bones. I was moved again, this time to a house of rest inland. They said it was kindness. Fewer stares, fewer drafts, fewer questions. They were right about one thing. Questions do not like comfort. From my window, I could no longer see water. That did not stop it from seeing me. Messengers came less often. Priors changed and forgot my name. Ledgers thinned. Ink ran pale. This is how endings begin. Quietly, politely. Then a boy arrived. He was sent to bring firewood and sweep. He had a scar on his cheek shaped like a hook. He asked too many questions. He listened when no one spoke. He reminded me of myself before ink learned my hand. One evening, he asked why I flinched at the sound of chains in the stable yard. Habit, I said. He did not accept that. Another night, during a storm that never broke, he asked why I kept scraps of writing hidden in a box beneath my bed. Accounts, I said. He smiled, not fooled. Children and the sea share that gift. I did not tell him everything. I told him enough to burden him. That is another sin I carry. I spoke of iron, of silence, of a right named softly to hide its teeth. I spoke of a woman who would not bend and a sea that would not swallow. He listened without blinking. Did anyone save her? He asked. No, I said. No one with clean hands. He thought on that. Then he asked, did it matter? The question struck deeper than accusation. Yes, I said, after the pause. It mattered that it failed. The storm passed without rain. The boy left soon after, sent away to learn a trade. I never saw him again. But I know he carried the weight. It shows in how footsteps hesitate at shorelines long after stories fade. I feel the end near. Breath counts itself now. 1, 2, 3. The pause stretches kindly, almost gentle. I have hidden these pages where damp will not take them quickly, where fire will need effort, where hands must choose to reach. If you have reached, the choice was already made. Do not seek absolution here. There is none. Do not seek closure. Closure is a door barred from the outside. Seek only to notice. When a law is hidden, ask who benefits. When a right avoids witness, ask why. When faith demands silence, ask whose voice it fears. The sea will ask nothing of you. It never does. It will simply remember, and remembering is enough. I am tired. The count slows. The pause widens. What comes next is not mine to write. I write this with a borrowed dawn. My hand is steadied by habit, not strength. Breath counts me now, not the other way. There are things I did not say because they arrived too late to be useful and too early to forgive. They circle the truth like birds waiting for a field to empty. After the boy left, the house of rest grew quiet, too quiet. Keys turned without need. Footsteps paused outside my door, then moved on. Once, I found my box shifted, not opened. A warning without words. Power does not need to speak when it is certain. I waited. Waiting teaches patience to fear. One night, long after Compline, I heard water where there should be none. Not a leak, not rain. A slow, measured lap, as if stone remembered being shore. The sound came from the floor, from the walls, from my chest. I rose and followed it. In the lower passage, where stores once lay, a seam in the stone wept salt. White crust traced a line no mason had cut. I pressed my thumb there. It came away wet. The pause held. I understood then that erasure is never complete. It leaves residue, salt, iron, sound. I returned to my bed and hid the pages deeper. Not from men. From time. Time is careless. Men are not. At dawn they came. Two brothers I did not know. Gentle voices, gentle hands. They spoke of of comfort, of rest, of moving me where prayers are stronger. I knew the shape of that kindness. As they lifted me, my breath stuttered. 1, 2. The pause came early. I saw the shore as it was that morning. Wrong tide, wrong silence. I smelled pitch. I heard the chains sing. They thought I had fainted. They laid me down. They left to fetch water. I used the pause. I wrote this part. If I am found quiet after, know it was not peace that took me. It was completion. The count closed its circle. They will say I died of age. They will mean relief. Do not look for a grave by the water. Look for a place where stone sweats salt. Look for a ring cut free. Look for bells that hesitate after storms. The sea penance will be denied. It will be renamed. It will be said to have never existed. That is how such things survive. If you doubt this telling, good. Doubt keeps edges sharp, but do not dismiss the pause. Do not rush to fill it with comfort. When you stand at the shore and the tide withdraws too far, listen. When water returns too fast, step back. When authority speaks softly of mercy, check where the iron sleeps. I have given you what remains. The rest belongs to those who refuse to look away. The pause ends here. If these words reach you, then the pause has crossed hands. I am no longer counting. The count has taken me. What remains is weight without a bearer, sound without a throat. That is how truth survives when bodies fail. They buried me where records thin. A name was said wrong on purpose. The prayer was short. The stone was plain. No water nearby. They learned at last. But the sea does not measure distance the way men do. It reaches through ground, through memory, through the habits of fear passed from mouth to mouth. It reaches you now. You may wonder why nothing followed. No uprising, no reckoning, no sign in the sky. This is not that kind of story. Justice that arrives loudly is often late. Justice that whispers is patient. What happened after me is not written because it is not finished. The iron will surface again. Not the same piece, not the same shore. Iron learns roots. It travels by hands and needs and names that change. It will be called something else. It always is. The sea penance was not unique. That is the truth men fear more than guilt. It was a pattern, a method, a way to let power pretend its hands were clean while the water did the work. Remember this. Whenever death is hidden, someone is being taught a lesson. Whenever a right avoids witnesses, someone is being warned. Whenever faith demands silence, it is afraid of sound. I did not save her. I did not save myself. I saved a fracture. A moment where the machine stuttered. That is enough to unmake it slowly. If you feel unease near calm water, trust it. If you hear counting where no voice speaks, listen. If you sense a pause when none is permitted, stay there. Do not ask for her name. Names close stories. Let this one stay open. Ask instead why certain punishments are never painted, why some stones are always damp, why bells hesitate after storms, as if waiting for permission to ring. History is not what is remembered. It is what refuses to stay buried. I leave you with no comfort. Comfort is a door that locks from the outside. I leave you with a task. Watch the margins. Read what is not said. Listen for chains beneath hymns. Listen for water where there should be dust. And when you are told that the sea cleanses all sins, remember this confession. The sea refused. If this story unsettled you, imagine what was never found.